We're live. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Watercooler. I'm Pamela Schmidt, also known as Exchange Goddess, and I'm joined by my friends here from the community. We've got Al, Jonathan, and Merlin, a new person, but an old friend. And today we're going to be talking about hybrid and what is your definition of hybrid? Because based off all the comments I've received and conversations and blog posts and marketing, it seems like everyone's definition of hybrid is slightly different. So I thought, why not get together and then let's talk about and find out what does hybrid really mean. There you go, guys. I'm gonna throw it out there. Oh, wait. Before we start, I think we have an addition here. We got Ken Fisher. He wants to talk about hybrid too. So we just started, Ken, but I just threw out the topic, so I'm gonna let you guys roll. What do you think hybrid means to you, or what does hybrid mean to you? And no, I don't mean a BK and McDonald's together.
Wait, what?
Simply put, and we can dive deeper into it, but I think it's going to make my professional life a little bit more easier.
But really, but what does it mean though? Like hybrid, is it just where your data center's at, or is it just, the type of applications that you're using?
I look at having a presence both on premises and in the cloud. Either that or
define that even more. Okay, presence wise, are you talking about SaaS, like service wise, or are you
I don't know
about
that you
IaaS?
can define it more, because it could be any of that. It could be, I'm using functions in the cloud to send emails through Office 365 to my, and then have servers in my office,
So would you classify having Office 365? So with having Office 365, which is SaaS, right? And then you have servers on-prem, would you consider that a hybrid setup?
Sure.
Yeah, I would consider that hybrid, because you're using clouds. Like if you're using like Office 365 for your email and Salesforce for your CRM and all that, but then you have like on-prem applications running, I think that would definitely categorize you as hybrid.
I would take Kenneth's answer and sort of bring it up a little more generically. I would say any two or more physically separate management domains. So could be on-prem and functions like Kenneth mentioned. It could be, you might not have on-prem. You might be a company that runs 100% in Azure, in AWS, but you also take advantage of other SaaS platforms. So I think from a business perspective, there's probably not a lot of companies that don't fit in that model, but you could also look at it from an application perspective. And when I look at it from that perspective, I think of hybrid as having application requirements or business requirements that if one of those management domains is unavailable, your business or your application can't function properly.
So do you consider hybrid? I have work that I use in Azure and then some in AWS as well, but nothing on-prem. Does that count as hybrid?
And I would say so, yeah. You got two, for what it's worth, distinct, separate management domains. You have to maintain and support Azure. You have to maintain and support AWS. You might have tools that allow you to do it from, some set of common utilities or scripts or things that you've built on your own, but they're still separate. So yeah, even public cloud to public cloud.
All right, so here's a different one for you. What about private cloud and generic on-prem? So you have one data center, but you have some that are a private cloud type thing, and you have some that are just straight server.
But it's all in the same data center.
But it's all in the same data center.
Yeah, I wouldn't really consider that hybrid. That's just, you have it all in one place. It's not available anywhere else. You're not connecting to anything else. That's just a data center that you're like working towards maybe cloudifying, but it's not a hybrid.
All right, 2 data centers, same company.
Wait, I'm going to,
The other one doesn't.
so that's not how, well, isn't that multiple points of location for your data?
It's all.
I guess technically it is, but not really, right?
Well,
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
no, I get you're playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, me too.
If it's in the same data center, it could potentially be using the same back-end infrastructure for all the stuff. It's just the management front ends that you've got. You've automated part of it, and the other of it is just maybe bare metal servers connecting to the same storage that your private cloud is using. That's just like a single data center instance.
So maybe it's multiple points of data or multiple points of location for your data that is separate from your data center.
Yeah, now if you had like 2 different private clouds in 2 different data centers that you're connecting together and like doing some stuff, then maybe you're like getting more to something like that, where you've got like that private cloud stuff and your local stuff, like non-cloudified assets in 2 different data centers. Now you're starting to kind of build something a bit hybrid. I don't know if I would totally agree with Jonathan though on like cloud to cloud being hybrid, because that's just cloud. Like,
Are you sure? Because I'm leaning towards a little bit of that as well, because it is multiple points of data. It's multiple points for your data, right? Do you have
it's multiple points of data, but like
separate data centers? Technically, if you've got separate clouds,
it's all cloudish though. So it's like I guess the
it's a
traditional
hybrid cloud
of it though is like hybrid is like on-prem being married to off-prem in the cloud kind of thing. Now if everything's all in the cloud, even if it's like different data centers, that's still just cloud. It's not really hybrid.
How about two different methods of support? So for example, Azure and AWS, you have 2 entirely different portals. On-premises stuff requires an entirely different method of getting in, essentially. Maybe define it that way.
I guess, but like it's still all in the cloud. So it's like hybrid sort of lends to, you still have something on-prem that you need to maintain. So that's why you're creating a hybrid thing. Otherwise, you would just put everything in the cloud and all of your stuff would exist in the cloud. And then there's no hybrid because you don't have any on-prem. So like, looking at like the traditional, like where hybrid came from, like, there's always sort of some underpinning of on-prem required there.
Well, I have to admit, one of the things I was thinking of is if your workstation, your laptop, unless you're just considering it as a smart terminal, let's say you've got Word installed on that, but everything else you do in the cloud, is that hybrid? And if so, is it possible to have something that's not hybrid other than all on-prem?
I don't know if I would consider my laptop to be
why wouldn't you though? Because I mean it
requires on-prem support.
Yeah, it does. It's an endpoint, right?
It is an endpoint. But it's like
somebody's phone's going off.
Yeah, sorry, that's my phone.
Everyone's mad at Merlin's take on needing on-prem to be hybrid.
New guy.
So
Merlin, stop it. That's not
it. Is kind of a weird one because like that it's a client device, but if we're talking about hybrid, like are we talking about hybrid from like an infrastructure data center perspective, or are we talking about it just from like a cloud consumption perspective? Because if it's just a cloud consumption perspective, then the laptop example makes sense. But if you're talking about it from like an infrastructure perspective, it's kind of, that doesn't make sense at all.
I love this. I love this conversation because I read all these what is the quadrant in the quad, like you read all these reports and everyone's got different opinions on this, and everything I've seen so far, nobody likes to bring up endpoints. But technically, if your endpoint's on premises and you've got some data that's in the cloud, such as Office 365, Salesforce, whatever you want to call it, and you may have some services on premises, or maybe you don't. But if you have an endpoint that's on premises, which most of us do, that to me, that's hybrid. I don't know. Because you can, in theory, have your endpoints in the cloud.
So
I'm just going through that, there's
that theory that I was telling
desktop.
you, the theory I was telling you about yesterday, just to share in this environment. So my theory is that, when I started in computers, we had a mainframe, we had dumb terminals. All they could do was connect to the mainframe. Mm-hmm. Because a terminal couldn't be powerful enough to do what we needed to do. So we had to connect to a shared machine. Then came PCs. PCs were powerful enough to do what we needed to do, and you could have one on your desk. No need for mainframes anymore. So mainframes started drifting a bit, although like my company still has a mainframe. Then came the cloud. The cloud is there because we needed something with more power than we could have easily on our desk. And it provided a lot of features that we just don't have. So now we have smart terminals connecting to a bigger machine. And some people use it as a terminal. I mean, it may be a smart terminal, but I know people who literally, they get on their laptop, they connect to an EC2 instance that is their desktop, and then they go from there into the rest of the network. So I wonder if eventually we won't start going back again to having powerful enough machines to have at home. But regardless, the reason I bring that up is because I think it's interesting, the idea of having a terminal. Does that count as on premises? And how much do you use your laptop outside of a way to get into the cloud?
I think as long as you're maintaining those laptops, those desktops, endpoints from a centralized operations point of view, I mean, I think of that as a data center. If you just have a bunch of laptops that people own and, like you said, just connect to the cloud and go on with their day, I think that's separate. But if you're maintaining a bunch of physical machines across a corporate network, I mean, that's a location. Even if you're, in times like these, everyone's remote, but you connect to the VPN, you authenticate against AD, you have some services that are run on-prem for maintaining those laptops. Like, yeah, that starts to push what I think is hybrid.
I don't know. As someone that came from an infrastructure background, that sounds sacrilegious because that's all client that stuff. Laptops aren't data centers.
You've never worked for a cheap company.
Yeah,
I've totally worked for a cheap company.
There's a payroll machine that's running on Windows 95 somewhere under somebody's desk or behind a drywalled partition of a room. Totally.
And somebody's bragging about uptime.
Yeah, totally. It has been rebooted in 10 years. And that's actually a true story too. One of the companies I used to work for, we found a machine that had Windows 95 on it, and there was some sort of payroll application that was accessed once a year. Actually, there's two stories. So one of them was a Windows 95 machine that we found out in the wild that was running payroll, and another one was actually an AS400 server that was drywalled off. And it was traced. They found it because this network cable, where's this go to? And it was traced back to this drywall, and there was a little hole. And they took out they're like, okay, something's going on. This is this is a drywall, but there's a network cable here. Took out the drywall, and there's a server sitting there on the ground. Yeah.
It'd be kind of nice if there was like a toner tool for application traffic, right? So you walk along, you walk through the panels, right? And oh, there's Active Directory. Oh, there it is on the server.
So you could be like the guy on the beach that's looking for metal.
So I actually have an example, Puma, to kind of piggyback on what you just mentioned without getting into specifics. We have a timesheet server. It was a physical box converted to a VM. I can't, again, get into specifics. It's running,
okay. It's okay.
Running,
You're forgiven.
it's running server 2008. It's been powered off for months at a time because we've since migrated to a new service, a new timesheet provider, however you want to describe it. And they're in the cloud, which helps us, makes our jobs a lot easier. But this former timesheet server, VM, like I was saying, it's shut down for months at a time. And maybe once every 3 months, we're asked by someone in the accounting department to fire it up. No specifics, just fire it up. We need to access some information, and we'll let you know when to turn it off. It's been like this for probably as long as I've been with this organization, 8 years. Haven't we moved off of that? I mean, can we get past that point now?
Every company has that. Every company has that. There's always that one machine that once a year they need to access.
Yeah,
the expression
we had a machine that said that signs on them say "Do not turn off." Nobody really knew what they were. They just had signs on them that said "Do not turn off."
But we are slowly adopting to cloud services. So, for example, we are an Office 365 customer, and we are a Dell Tech customer as well. And there are other services that we use that are based in the cloud. And we found, and then when I say we, this applies to my team and I, that in terms of support, it was a learning process for everybody involved, but it's been a very productive learning process. Folks have also, the end users that we support have adopted to the cloud. They're starting to learn more about the cloud and some of the features that are available to it. And there's not a reliance on anything on premises, which is fantastic, especially, for the past year since most, if not everybody's been working remote. There's no reliance on having to be in the office, turning on a server, and that sort of thing. However, we do provide endpoints for each of our end users. And most recently, plug, not intentional, but just to mention it, we are now a VMware Workspace ONE customer. So they are cloud-based. And we can enforce policies, with the click of a button, so on and so forth. We had that capability when we were on, in an on-premises structure, but it didn't give us the flexibility that we have now. So we definitely love everything about it so far, and we're still new. It's still 3 months into it, but from my perspective, especially on the Mac side, we have a small pool of Mac users. It's so much easier to configure, deploy, and very little touch in terms of getting it out to the end user's hands.
You're talking about before, losing a machine, right? And when we, as an industry, went to virtualization, right? The first thing that happens is sprawl becomes a problem, where you're looking at resource planning and how much you've got committed. And it's that thing of the more you abstract something, the easier, so the first reaction to that is usually sprawl. So do you see that with cloud? Like, is it approximately as easy to lose a VM in cloud as it was on-prem in a hypervisor? Or is it worse because you're not physically bound by the hardware at hand?
I can tell you in one sense that it is much more difficult to lose a VM in the cloud, because my company does their absolute best to lose stuff, but billing makes it impossible. So management gets
paying for it. You're vigilant.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but the management gets a billing report, and they go through it and they say, okay, what are all these? And if it's something that, this VM is showing up, but it has no cycles on it, why is it there? And they track it down.
So,
and you could not be paying attention.
Money, right? It's real money.
Entirely.
The cloud is real money. It's not, it's not monopoly money, or it's not money that shows up once a year off someone's, budget. It's real cash that you need to slap down to pay the bill, whether you're going to do it on your credit card or PO or whatever. But it's real. It's real money.
It is real money for sure. And like to Patrick's first comment there, not about the losing servers, but about sprawl. I think cloud 100% enables sprawl, because now it enables people inside of the organization who typically couldn't go provision resources because they couldn't get past gatekeepers to get what they wanted, can now be empowered by just having a credit card. Like at a previous company I was at before the one I'm at now, they would always ask me, it's like, well, are you cloud enabled? And I kind of hated that question, because like it's a very broad question, and I would kind of quit back. It's like, okay, well, do you have a credit card in your pocket? They're like, yeah. I'm like, well, you're cloud enabled, so there you go. But there was a company I was working with that they did an audit on their purchasing cards and discovered that throughout their organization, they were expensing about $35,000 a month in generic cloud services of all of the shadow IT stuff that people were just going and doing because they were sick of the IT department saying no. And the IT manager just went kind of like ape shit when he found out, because he's like, you guys are telling me there's no money to do these things, but we're spending $35,000 a month on all of this other stuff. He's like, give me that money and I can do the things that I need to do to build stuff so people won't do that.
I think another hidden cost too is not necessarily losing entire VMs or machines that were running in a corner, but I think cloud providers and everything is unique, everything is discrete. It's not a bunch of servers that you've already purchased and some storage. Your instances are separate from your storage, your volumes, they're separate from object storage. So yeah, I can, as somebody doesn't have an operations background, I might have access to go spin up instances and take snapshots and do backups and things like that. And I delete my instance and I think I'm done, but the business still might be paying for leftover snapshots, leftover archives that are put in some sort of object store or functions that are running. So there is still that operations mindset of keeping track of all of those things.
Do you think it helps to provide sort of cost to performance as a value feedback to those teams help? So in that example, right, where it's, hey, can we put that workload in a container? Well, no, we need to put it in a VM. But if you could be rewarded, right, for taking the time to repackage for a container, you could potentially operate it more efficiently. But they have to, the person making the decision, the technologist who's the kingmaker about what's going to get purchased, if they don't have feedback of why they would do that, is it harder to incentivize them?
Are containers for real though? It's been 2 years since I worked in enterprise.
Wait, did you say are containers real?
Are they getting real legitimate use in the enterprise rather than let's test this, on a container? Let's try. Are we putting real live production stuff on your average enterprise, not your fancy schmancy, I'm high tech, whatever. I'm talking like healthcare, Capital One, financial institutions, people that are working with all our medical records, things like that. Like, are they really using containers right now for live production work? Because 2 years ago, the company I worked at, hell no.
Well, does the cloud use containers in the background? Because if so, then probably yes. If that doesn't count, then probably not. Well, it's not in my company.
I can't disclose customers, but yes, there are people that are using containers in enterprise, and not just like the early adopters that are getting in on it, but like people that are realizing that, like to Patrick's point, there definitely is a way to make things more efficient and save more money. So container adoption is on the rise. And I think that's like also being driven by like, VMware Tanzu stuff, where it's like making it easier for organizations that aren't quite ready to jump into things to consume it a little easier, because now it's something a little friendlier and like, you know, not as like scary as like just an open source project kind of thing.
Well, so are we talking like large organizations? Or are we talking mom and pop shops with a few hundred people to 50 people?
Large organizations.
Okay. So the average organization in the US are small to medium sized businesses, which, you know, their IT staff is going to range from person of 1 to maybe 100 to 200 people, right? I see. Yeah. I mean, those organizations, depending on what they're doing, I can't see the use of containers being actively used unless they actually have like a real dev team and they've got separate teams, because your average mom and pop shop, that, you know, team of 2 guys running around being the sysadmin plus the desktop admin plus the security admin, they're tired. They have no time to work on containers, Kubernetes. They want to, but I just don't see them actively using it for production yet. Jonathan, I saw you waving your hand there.
I just feel very seen right now. Like we absolutely, I have the use cases for containers, but it is, like you said, playing sysadmin, network admin, security admin, all of the admins. You know,
probably
it's hard
an admin too.
Yeah, it's hard to find the time to do that right when I can, you know, have some auto scaling groups spin up and spin down things. Their VMs, instances, whatever you want to call them, whatever your platform / vendor refers to them as. You know, yes, it takes me 3 seconds to boot up instead of half a second like I could on a container, but I can do that in my sleep right now. So unless you came from an organization that was practicing those skills, I don't think, you know, I would say probably a lot of them are going to struggle to find the time to do it.
How big is your organization? I know where you work, but
where my group's about 50 people, mostly engineers, not IT engineers. I'm the only like ops person, really.
Because ops really isn't needed. You say my sarcasm.
Ask my Jira board that.
Yeah.
So on that comment,
email, right?
Does anybody else find themselves fighting the way the cloud is being sold? That, you know, the cloud doesn't require IT people. You just spin up your own stuff and you're done. And then they come to you.
I have a problem with that.
Since the day it became popular, yeah, it's been. You know, you can have very smart people in other roles, data scientists, DBAs that, you know, will forget more about, you know, SQL Server or Postgres than I'll ever know. But if they're not thinking about the impact of firewalls and security groups and security policies and user access, you know, things can get opened up that you don't want opened up very quickly. So yeah, I've been railing against that one for as long as I've been Twittering, probably.
And see, you know, I'm on the DBA point of view, and we get, we don't need as many DBAs for the enterprise anymore because we're going to be going in the cloud. I'm like, you need more because performance has a hard cost. Yeah, well, I mean, performance is a hard cost now. There's a bottom line directly associated with that performance. So you need more people worried about performance now to save you money. You know, I don't know. It gets frustrating sometimes, especially when someone says, "Hey, I created this new machine. I need you to support it."
Well, no, I don't think it saves costs in any way. It shifts costs to different places.
That's a great point.
You don't go into the cloud to save money.
That's not what my senior management says.
Yeah. So there was
that makes a very good point here.
There was a city that I was working with where I knew the guys there, like the database guys, and the city was telling the database guys, like their CTO, move it into the cloud, move it to the cloud, and they were digging their heels in about it, and they didn't want to do it because like they knew like the way they had everything set up there, unless they were going to refactor everything, it was going to be insanely expensive to just drop it in the cloud. And the CTO was kind of losing it on these guys, accusing them of being slackers. So they finally got a quote from a cloud service provider to put their databases in the cloud. And when they got the price back on it, they gave it to them. They're like, "This is why we haven't done it, because their yearly operating costs were going to be like $500,000 a year to run the database infrastructure they had in the cloud, which just runs on local servers in their environment." And the guy's like, "That's more than I've allotted for the next 3 years of your budget." And they're like, "Yeah, that's just for 1 year, so that's why we haven't done it." And so it's interesting because it's like, there's this, I think, a higher level expectation from like some management that, yeah, going to the cloud is going to save money because that's what the marketing is telling them. And yes, it can save money if you're going to use container services and you're going to refactor everything and you're like going to just like build for the cloud. But if you're not going to do that, if you're just going to take infrastructure that you have right now and plunk it in the cloud and be like, "There, I fixed it," it's like, holy shit, no, you're going to cost you like, so much more money. So
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to say that is the thing that keeps a lot of, once you get to cost and cost for performance, that keeps a lot of things on-prem and is a legitimate argument. And so I'm increasingly thinking that, obviously hybrid doesn't have a SKU. You don't go out and buy it, right? Nobody wanted it. But the reason that hybrid is forever and not going to just magically be this transitional phase that we go through. I mean, it should get a little bit easier over time as there's more gravity around cloud, but hybrid is what happened once IT actually got a look at cloud, right? Like past the sales process, past the one pagers, past all of that stuff, and they actually set it up and they're like, this thing, the maturity here compared to where packaged applications are, not even close. And they are then responsible for creating levels of connectivity, monitoring, basic services like abstracted storage, even though it might be in multiple places, like suddenly started rebuilding over and over and over again. And that it's that thing of, oh, cloud's not cheaper. We joke about that, but there's increasing evidence and teams seem to be able to do that comparison now. Like they'll run an application that was fine on-prem, but it's real chatty and needs IOPS. And all of a sudden there's this unexpected billing charge because that thing running in a container or just running in a VM, all of a sudden is driving a lot of storage related charges that it didn't on-prem. And so it feels like that hybrid is IT's response to all of the unfulfilled promises of what cloud was going to magically do.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I like that comment you said that hybrid is forever, because I agree. Hybrid will be forever because there's always going to be things that don't make sense to put into the cloud. And maybe someday when we could be all dead or something like that, there could be like, utopian cloud that could take all this stuff in and run it efficiently and effectively, and they'll call it the Matrix. But
comes out this year, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think like, you're absolutely right. Hybrid is our response to the cloud as like, this cloud discussion that's been happening now for like, 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about it now, it's interesting too, seeing the technologies. So like, I admit, like I work for Dell, and we've been building a lot of technologies now that your on-prem infrastructure now is enabled through like REST API and other connections into like Ansible and other scripting and stuff, where you can have on-prem infrastructure that you can cloudify now, and you can like put that automation into it so that you can absorb that stuff. You can use that technology in the cloud, but then you can bring that into your on-prem data center and make it more efficient and make it better. So in that sort of sense, like I think hybrid will be forever. And there's some things that make sense to put in the cloud. Like if you have Exchange and you're still running it on-prem and you haven't dumped it into Office 365 and got rid of that like hell monster, do that. Like, there's really no reason to run Exchange on-prem anymore unless you're a sadist.
I'm going to agree with that. Okay. Unless you're a super large organization. There are some organizations that still need Exchange on-prem, but for the most part, don't even. Why put that extra workload on yourself? Give it to the people who know how to do it best.
Exactly, and then that frees you up to have your IT people doing more. Like I spent 2 years as an exchange monkey, and that was like the 2 darkest years of my IT career. And it was a punishment thing. I spoke out of turn in a meeting, and in result, I was put in charge of exchange for 2 years.
So wait. So you're saying they punished me and oh, okay, yeah. Exchange.
Well, yeah. But so you're like one of the top experts in it. So I don't think it was as much punishment for you, but like,
I felt it though. In the beginning, yeah. I felt exchange was a punishment. I absolutely hated it.
Well, and we were running Exchange 2007 Service Pack 1, and we couldn't update the service packs because we were using Xantaz EAS, which was so out of date that it wouldn't allow us to upgrade from Service Pack 1. Anyway, it was just a hell nightmare, and I hated Exchange because of that.
Most people do.
So like that's a great example. Put that into the cloud. Put it into Office 365. CRMs. Use like SFDC or like other things that are out there for it. Why torture yourself to build something and manage it when you can like reliably get it for a decent price depending on the size of your organization? But then there's other applications that are more in-house. Maybe you have some like billing stuff. Maybe you have some like other things. Maybe you're a factory and you're running automation stuff on there. You probably don't want to put PLC stuff into the cloud, so you're going to always have a requirement to have something on-prem, and so that's going to lend to that whole hybrid is forever kind of thing.
I like that idea too, that a lot of businesses that had been looking at cloud and kind of dragged their heels are instead consuming what would have been cloud as SaaS, right? Like we're just because, as you mentioned, like you're getting, it's being run by the experts. I mean, certainly like I wouldn't even imagine standing up a Kubernetes server now when I can just use a managed service for that, right? Let somebody else do that. But you look at the success of Office 365, for example. I mean, we were on-prem for years and years and years, and Windows 365 a few years ago. And it's great. It works really well. And for the first time, SharePoint works. It's amazing, right? And instead of
actually said SharePoint works.
SharePoint works. Well, that's because we're not running it. And if you think about it, any IT organization, right? Like if you look at the normalized curve of quality of any application delivered, even if you have experts on hand who know, let's use Exchange, for example, inside and out, unless you have processes and budget to go along with that and a dedicated focus on customer satisfaction and constantly, even when Exchange is running okay, always trying to improve that experience of the user, you are going to have at best an average quality deployment, right? Based on the natural curve of you're in one business and everybody's doing that, as opposed to O365 is being run by people who are experts and know how to make SharePoint work. And so when you adopt a service, Salesforce, same thing, right? When you adopt a service as a business, just statistically, you are more likely to end up with an implementation that's better than the one that you had. I mean, there are some organizations that can still on-prem out-deliver Exchange using Exchange on-prem, but the amount of work and focus that takes could much better be used somewhere else in the organization.
Well, exactly. And you think about like how much time we have, like, well, not us specifically, because like I haven't been in operations now for a while, but like how much time most operations people have, they're being spread thin. There's like more and more projects for them to do, less time, less budget, things like that. So if they can offload these things, get that management off their plate, get those like, that frustration off, that frees up so much more time for them to go work on other more important things for the business. So that's definitely, like when I'm having cloud conversations with customers, that's where we kind of shift to, because it's like, well, if you're thinking about cost savings, then you're approaching this from the wrong perspective completely. So it's like, I kind of like to take it more from like what are the applications you're using and what are the goals are you looking at achieving with that? So to start to look at it from an application and access perspective, and then step back from there to figure out what makes sense. Like, can we cloudify this for you, or does it make more sense to just modernize your on-prem infrastructure? And most of the time, like, it leads towards a hybrid type thing where it's like, okay, let's peel some of this away and put that into a SaaS service or something out there, or, an infrastructure as a service like platform for you, and then keep these parts on-prem for you. But I think like going forward, hybrid is going to be where most people end up.
I never imagined that hybrid would actually drive adoption of hyperconverged, but hyperconverged was going to be, you don't need cloud, you're going to use this other thing instead. And a lot of organizations, like software actuated framework, software actuated infrastructure just weren't there yet. And then they went to cloud and realized, oh, I can use these APIs to manage my infrastructure, but I wish it was on-prem. And I'm seeing a lot of people now start to adopt hyperconverged, because what they basically want is just software actuated infrastructure, but they still want to have it on-prem. And I'm like, would they have had that experience if they hadn't worked with those same workloads in cloud and that same storage in cloud, and then said, okay, I want this level of functionality and abstraction so that I don't have to focus on the plumbing once the boxes are set up. But they still see the cost advantage, or they have a particular governance or regulatory reason why they're just more comfortable on-prem.
Yeah.
One of the strangest reasons I've seen to move to the cloud is politics. Our senior management doesn't like the senior management of the group that does IT. So they want to go to the cloud to get rid of them.
So I have a couple of examples to share. So we've got SharePoint in Office 360 and 365, but we have an on-prem SharePoint server. The amount of problems created by the on-prem SharePoint server is ridiculous. The amount of end user issues, so on and so forth, performance, so on and so forth. I could probably count on my hands, and we've been in the cloud, SharePoint in the cloud, Office 365 for probably 3 years now, probably 10 times at most, user-related issues or issues that they're reporting. And of those issues, if it's 10, 9 have to do with just permissions. They're not providing the proper permissions, or our end users are not informing us of a contractor that they're doing work with needs access to our environment, so we have to whitelist their domain or their email address, so on and so forth. And in fairness to the end user, they don't know that, they don't care to know that, they just want it to work. What I wanted to ask, and I am sure this has been a discussion point, especially since the pandemic hit, if you've been primarily on premises, now is the opportunity to consider the cloud options. We were one of those one of those shops, Kenneth, to your point, where management was very hesitant about security and so on and so forth. But now they're seeing the advantages to it and how much it's allowing us to work in other areas that we didn't have the time to do so prior to making this move. Yes, there's a learning process, and the cloud is convenient, and convenience costs money. So another example, and not getting into specifics, we have a cloud provider for our voice over IP solution. We had purchased back in November a large meeting license. You can probably get who I'm referring to, a 500-seat meeting license. We'd asked them to cancel it back in November. We didn't discover until this month that they hadn't canceled it, and we've been charged all this time for it. They're going to give us that money back, refund it, etc. But those are the little things that you just tend to forget because it is convenient. And when you tick a box, when you turn something on, you forget to go back and tick it off or turn it off.
It's the ESPN Disney Hulu problem. I can't. How did I license that? Where is that?
I signed up to watch them Baby Yoda shit last year, and it was just like, oh, I'll do the free trial and then cancel it, and that was last December. And who's been giving Disney all their money since then?
I have.
Why do you think they have free trials? I mean, that's the whole point of the free trial.
Exactly. You forget.
Free trials, I'm telling you. There can be a death of me. Yeah. I look at my credit card like, oh, shit, another free trial. And then you don't want to call and cancel because it's such a pain to get somebody on the phone.
I'm using the phone.
What?
I use the phone. Get online and chat.
Yeah, but sometimes you don't want to. I know this one company. They're like, you got to write us a letter. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not writing you a letter. Kids are watching this, okay?
It's weird when companies require that. Like when I moved to Ontario to cancel my insurance in British Columbia for my car, I had to send them a letter in the mail saying that a breakup letter. So
gym memberships.
I literally wrote it as a breakup letter. I was like, dear ICBC, it's not you, it's me. I'm moving on. And
I had a gym.
You don't have to put this in the lost category.
Yeah, I had a gym membership that I paid for 10 years, but I went like 3 times and they refused to cancel. I'm like, and it was like $5 a month, it wasn't a big deal, but I'm like, oh my God. And every time I went, like, I'm like, I want to cancel this. And they're like, well, you need to send us a letter. And I'm like, I haven't gone here in years. Like, and finally last year, I'm like, can you look at the record and look at the last time I was here? And she looked, she's like, yeah, you're canceled. I'm like, thank God. I've been coming every year to try to get this thing.
So you bring up a good point. So everyone's on this Peloton craze. It's been discussed here in my household. And if everyone's going to commit to it, including myself, I'm all for it. But I know it's going to be a toy for a month, and then everyone's going to stop using it, and you're still stuck in that contract. So we're buying an alternative indoor cycling bike, and we're just going to subscribe to a monthly service and give that a try and just use it on our iPad or, fire it up on AirPlay using the Apple TV. But that's another thing. You get sucked into convenience. You spoke of the membership. Getting sucked into Peloton is easy. Oh, yeah, it's cute. It's great. Let's get it. And then 5 months into it, you're not using it, but you're still paying $40 a month for the service.
Well, it's like the cloud.
Yeah.
Once you're in, I'm okay. Even though everybody knows my employer now, it is difficult to get out though. Let's think about it. If once you're in and you decide like, shit, this isn't for me. I need to get out of Dodge. It's not as easy to say I need to get out of Dodge. It's like
you're right. It is very interesting too. So like there was a customer I was talking with that like went super deep into building their application on AWS until they hit a wall, and they're like, okay, there's stuff we want to do that we can't really do in AWS. And then they started hearing about like the Azure on-prem options, and that would lead more to what they actually wanted to do. But then when they started looking at, okay, how do we refactor this application that we've built on AWS to use all of the AWS stuff to move it into Azure, they're just like, yeah, no, because we built this application to be in AWS, like it's going to be insane to try and rebuild it to put it into Azure. But if they knew like what Azure could have done before and that it would have met their like requirements beforehand, and they built the application in the first place for Azure, they would have been in a way different place. So it's hard to like extract yourself from that. And that's where like the cloud discussion can get a little sketchy, because like, sure, it's like, it's almost like the drug dealer thing. It's like, yeah, here, the first hit's free.
Right.
But once you start liking these services, oh, I got a new one. Come here. Have a little taste of this one.
Yep.
Ask Parler.
The tool is definitely designed for getting in.
Ask Parler. Who was that said Ask Parler? Was that you, Jonathan, that said Ask Parler?
Yeah, well, I mean,
how is Parler?
they don't exist anymore, as far as I know. Like that was more of like, if you're going to build a platform for hate, eventually no one's going to like support you at all.
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely.
Parler makes a good point though. The whole Parler scenario, they were built entirely in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
And when that happened, they had to find an alternative, another data center, another cloud provider, and nobody said yes, we're going to support you. So now they've got to be on-prem, right? So I guess if you're in the cloud, you can always go back on-prem if you were on-prem.
I was going to say part of it though, and there was a joke about it originally, and then I'm trying to remember who said it. It was somebody we know on Twitter. Basically, like they're destined to fail if they were spending $300,000 a month on AWS to run Parler, right? They're basically saying that the application was coded so inefficiently, and there were all these conversations about, well, it was designed to be cloud agnostic and just run in VMs and yada yada yada. But would they have been able to find a host if that application was coded more efficiently, right? They wouldn't need necessarily the scope of AWS or some other, top tier provider, and they might have been more likely to find someone. So that is one thing with cloud that I see a lot is people
It does go back to that whole you can throw money at it thing.
Well, but it also goes
you can try though, guys. I mean,
it wasn't just
money.
It wasn't just their hosting that was like the problem with that, though. It was all of the other cloud services that plugged into the application that enabled them to work, that losing access to those. So even if they found another place to land, they had no one to do SMS for them anymore. Like, all their other like they got evicted from everyone. And, I get moral of the story is just don't be racist. Maybe that'll work out. And like, it's bad when Amazon says you're a bad person. That's kind of a funny one. And they gave him a lot of leeway too. I think it was like 40 some complaints. They're like, yeah, you've hit 40 complaints of hateful stuff. So maybe this has gone too far now. Not at 5, not at 10, like it was over 40. Yeah. But that was an interesting thing. They built everything in the cloud, and there was some like racist white dude that runs a data center that was like, I will totally give Parler a home, but it didn't matter that he was going to give them space because they lost access to all the other services that they needed to run the application. So Parler was not hybrid. They were all in the cloud.
I guess the moral of the story is don't be hating.
Yeah, don't be hating. Yeah, you shouldn't.
Spread love, not hate.
Just be neutral. Just don't spread hate. Just start with that.
Yeah.
Neutral's not good either, because neutral
is enabling.
It's enabling, and it adds complacency.
That's not neutral. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, just at least get to a place where you're curious. Like when I look at this period of irrationality, it's like, well, what's really, whether it's flat earth or whatever it is, right? Like the undercurrent of all of it is outsourcing being rational, right? Like it's too hard to think now. I'm just going to follow.
It started with the marginalization of the education system. So you look at all of the cuts that happened to the education system over decades now, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor, and those fruits are rotten. Like it's crazy to see that nearly 50% of America voted for that spray tan with like a handful of brain cells. Like it was insane that people still fervently support that. Like sorry. Anyways, off on a tangent with that one.
No, but I think you make a good point. It is part of our education system that all the cuts we've had and the whole education system, right? Classes being cut, like just all sorts of stuff. And like people aren't learning the same stuff we learned back when we were going to school. They don't even teach cursive handwriting, okay?
Critical thinking.
I think this is where
this stuff is happening. So is it having an effect on society today? Yes, we are seeing the effect on society when you have a well-rounded education and you aren't cutting things out. Critical thinking is one. There is no critical thinking. We are just teaching you how to pass those state exams. Yeah,
or just spot BS.
Well, I do want to point something out though. Is you talk about Parler, as far as the cloud goes, you're now, just to go back to a little bit more to the original subject, but you're now forcing people to be, to work with another group. When it was all on premises, okay, you buy the hardware, you get the skills you need.
Yeah,
you're moving. Now that it's everything's becoming more and more tied into this cloud concept, you have to accept their morals and what they're willing to work with.
So
not necessarily, because like when you look at the terms of services with all these services, like there's a code of ethics and conduct for all of this stuff.
Does that obviously people aren't reading it?
Yeah, people aren't reading it because with the dumbification of North America is based, and the whatever dickhead that should never be named ever again, he made hate cool again. He made it okay to be racist, and so all these people felt empowered with oh my God, white people have been treated so poorly all of this time. We need to reclaim white power back again. It's a huge mess. But inside of all that, the terms of services, it says don't be hate, don't do the things that they specifically did. Now I think,
but that only helps.
The pandemic that have come out of this though is that we've all been stuck at home. So like, I don't think Black Lives Matter would have got as much traction as it has over last year had the pandemic not happened. Because if we were all continuing on with daily life and doing our things and like, doing whatever, those people would have died and it just would have been static and we would have never heard about this. But we were all at home, we all heard it, and we all started getting outraged about it. Now, a benefit of that is I think some of these younger people are starting to realize, hey, there's some really dumb people older than me and I don't want to end up like this. And so there's a lot of young people now that are like going out there seeking information and bringing this back to the conversation. I think cloud's going to enable a lot of this stuff because we've been consuming more cloud resources. People are like looking at education platforms and like, enablement of technology to bring more education to places. So I think a benefit of like this whole pandemic and everything that's been going on is that there is a thirst for knowledge and people want to empower themselves. People want to know more and people want to be better. And, cloud and hybrid cloud is going to help do that.
Well, and I mean, to that point, if I want to learn networking now, I can go out to Azure and for a few bucks, I can create myself a network and start practicing.
Yeah, it's wild. You don't need to have a home lab anymore.
Do whatever. And whereas you couldn't do that before, you couldn't just bring up an Exchange server.
Yeah.
But why would you? I'm sorry, but why would you right now? Okay.
Well, yeah, why would you right now? But I think
on the Office 365
to get root access.
But
to get access.
Managing a VM, managing a
spin up a VM. We don't say Exchange because I'm going to call everybody crazy if you're doing that in a lab environment.
Well, anyway, I got to run because I've got a team meeting I got to get to.
Well, thank you for joining, Ken.
Yep. It was nice talking to y'all.
Yeah.
Point there, though, even though all this like cloud stuff and all this like ease of access is available here, I think it is still important to be a well-rounded technologist to understand where this stuff came from, how it connects at like the infrastructure level. So even if you're just jumping in DevOps and you just want to do coding and like all of your experiences in the cloud, I think it's important to learn even at like a 101, 201 level how infrastructure works, because it's just going to help you understand what you're interacting with. And so it's
well, I still have in whether it's AWS or Azure, I still have service A, whether that's a VM, an instance, I've got database services. Like, how do those connect? How are they going to authenticate together? I still need to understand that functionality. I need to know how to get from availability zone 1 to availability zone 2. Where are my routes going me? Where are my routes taking me? Is this a private subnet, a public subnet? So all those infrastructure skills, I think if you have those, you shouldn't be afraid to go into an organization that is maybe even 100% on cloud. If it's all Azure or all AWS or all GCP, whoever it happens to be, if you know subnetting and permissioning and authentication, you can make that work in a cloud environment.
Well, and for enabling hybrid, that's such an important thing, because I think there's a lot of people that don't think about that aspect where it's like, oh, let's do a hybrid cloud DR situation where we have our on-prem data center and then we're just going to put a bunch of stuff in Azure and then there we fixed it. It's like, okay, well, you put a bunch of stuff in Azure, but how are you going to connect that to your data center? How are you going to protect that stuff? What is your failover going to be? The applications you're using, will they even work for doing that kind of like failover? Like, have you thought about all these aspects towards it? And so that's like a really important thing with hybrid cloud, is understanding like what applications are you trying to protect and what are you trying to achieve? And would it just make more sense if you want to have that kind of high availability and sort of disaster recovery capability? Would refactoring it and just making it full cloud native make more sense than trying to do some sort of like hybrid monster between what you have on-prem and what you're trying to connect into the cloud? And then if you need to like have that sort of like something on-prem connected into the cloud, like, does a VPN make sense? Are you going to use ExpressRoute if you're doing Azure or things like that? Like, it's understanding the underpinning infrastructure is important to like make an effective hybrid cloud strategy.
That's the thing that was unfortunate with SDN, right? Or SDX more broadly, was, you were going to have this composable method to reliably affect change, to change the environment. And instead, it wouldn't always work, that the controller overlay wouldn't work or the integrations between different vendors wouldn't work. And so you had this new technology sitting on top that required expert skills and dev focus at the same time that you still had to be able to fix the thing when it broke. And if that was a VPN for that one weird cloud service that connects back to a gateway somewhere and the VPN has collapsed because there's an expired certificate, that's not the kind of thing that somebody who's dev focused that's going to be using the controllers thinking about. So now you have both, where SD-WAN is a smaller subset, right? You're managing BGP and a couple of other things and automating that, but you're still relying on the cloud to provide, the subnetting and other services, but everything on prem still requires the same set of skills. That's the piece of automation that just hasn't been pulled out of the system.
Absolutely.
Okay, everyone. Last thoughts, since we are out of time. Anybody last thoughts before we close up our water cooler for this Friday?
I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I'm going to show the old man in me. So you want to be careful how you invest in the cloud and some of the services that it provides without reading the finer details. And again, going back to way back, when Sony was at their peak with their devices like cameras and so on and so forth, everything was proprietary. But everybody wanted to be on that Sony bandwagon. Everybody wanted a Sony webcam. Everybody wanted a Sony digital camera. But guess what? They didn't realize before investing in these products that they're proprietary. You have to buy everything through them. You're stuck through them. And guess what? When that digital camera is obsolete, you're SOL. You can't find a part for, if it failed, you can't find a part for it on the market brand new to replace it. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is be careful before you invest in something, do your due diligence, and just think of the use cases of how it's going to be used and put some thought into it. Just don't, say, I've got the money, let's do this, we can make this happen.
From a hybrid cloud skills perspective for folks that are out there and maybe their first job was supporting a company running in the public cloud, AWS or Azure, take the time to go learn the underlying components, because everything that I've found so far is will help you in that journey. If you know what S3 does and what that in Amazon a load balancer is called an application load balancer, that's great. But if you don't understand how load balancers work or authentication works, you're going to struggle to do anything with that. You might know the screens to go through or the commands to run to make it show up, but it being there in and of itself doesn't help you, doesn't really get you anywhere. You got to understand how all of those components work and the underlying network bits. And if anyone's looking for Sony memory sticks, I'll throw some up on eBay.
That's a great point there, Jonathan. And
that is a great point. I mean, the cloud is just someone else's computer / someone else's data center. It's.
And you know what? You can go to Microsoft Learn if you want to learn more about Azure. And I'm just not talking about reading about what Azure does, but actual take learning modules. They're free. You can go through all these different modules. We've got Azure Fundamentals, but we've got stuff on like machine learning,
So
like all sorts of stuff, right? Like you actually get to go through these modules, go through these tests, play with it, and then you can actually take a certification to verify that you actually know this stuff.
I just did my Azure Fundamentals exam.
I saw you pass. That's great.
Yeah, it's the first certification I've done in like 8 years. Not that there wasn't an incentivized reason at work where I had to do it for at all, but the Microsoft Learning Platform was fantastic. The modules were great. I saw Rick a couple of times in there. That was kind of cool. And the demos and examples they have there were awesome. So yeah, I totally would back Microsoft Learn to jump in there and use it. It was a great platform, and I'm definitely going to do more modules in it.
So just kind of a sneak here. I'm going to be doing some more water cooler streams that I'm actually going to go through the Learn modules with a couple people, and we're going to go through it live. So there may be some ones that we don't know anything about it, and it's going to be like, okay, let's take this test and let's see what happens. But you guys are more than welcome to join as we go through individual Learn modules.
Yeah, I'd be down with that. And I mean, I just want to say thank you for having me on here. This was a lot of fun. Like it's I've been kind of quiet in the tech world the last little bit, and just getting back into the saddle and jumping into it again.
Patrick, you got one last note? Al, any? Patrick, Al, you guys good?
I'm good.
We're all good. We had a great week. We had inauguration. You know, we're ready to roll. Okay, everyone. Thank you everybody for watching. Oh, Patrick dropped off, but yeah, it's Friday. It's 4:00 here on the East Coast, and I'm ready to roll. My dog is barking like crazy. Thank you for watching us or watching the replay. Thank you for my guests. And until the next time we do another water cooler, have a great evening, morning, or afternoon. Bye.
Hi, everyone.